It's not on the agenda. So
Sorry?
it wasn't included on the agenda.
Does it state the address on the agenda?
It says 356 West
That's all
Potomac.
you need.
Okay.
That's all we need.
But there's two parcels, if I understand.
I understand, but
46
I think it's all under 356 West Britannia is the
So,
the legal
so
address.
because the address is advertised, we will, I'll include it in the motion.
Thank you.
46-229, because it falls under the same address.
Thank you.
And you said so moved, and you seconded it, Council Blood?
Counselor Dunas seconded, aye, on discussion.
Okay. Any comments on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next item on the agenda is Prince Henry parcel 29-14.
All right, we got two left, both industrial properties. Been here 5 weeks, and we've gotten dozens of calls for businesses looking for industrial land. This and the one that's just right next to it, that we'll be talking about next, are key for industrial zone parcel. 28 acres for this one. There is limited frontage. We will need a waiver for that, but otherwise, the appraised value is 2.3 million.
You need a waiver from the zoning board?
Yes.
Okay, so the city would obtain the variance prior to,
That would be the intent, yes.
okay.
Yes.
So the intent would be the city petition the zoning board for a variance and then move forward with an RFP or an auction.
Auction is what we're recommending.
Auction
yes.
is what you're recommending. And the size is 28 acres.
Yep. Access to the rail line, which is huge.
Use would require a zoning change. That's at this board. So talk to me about that.
Zoning change? I don't know about that.
That's what it says on the slide. The city council makes zoning changes.
I don't know.
Mr. Costa, are you familiar with this particular site?
Yeah, I have some familiarity with it.
Yes,
I have some familiarity
What's
with
the
it.
zoning change all about?
My recollection, so I haven't reviewed this recently, but my recollection is that it's zoned open space presently, so that would be a zoning change is an amendment to the zoning ordinance, which is approved through the council. As opposed to...
Open space isn't really a zone, though.
I believe that's the case. And so, there might be someone else at the table that's more familiar with it. This was, I haven't reviewed this.
Mr. Chair, Mr.
Recently.
Scanlon's in the
Conte, are you
room.
familiar with this? Oh, Mr. Scanlon, you probably know, have all the answers.
My record has, Mr. Chairman, my record has it as open space.
Okay.
Yes, it is zoned open space. That is an actual zoning designation. All of the properties in the city that are zoned open space are owned by the city. So that piece is one of the pieces that are left over from what was the large open space of the old Miles Standish Industrial Park. As it was zoned industrial, that open space got smaller and smaller. This is one of the residual pieces. It is zoned open space and would require a zoning change.
Have you done a history research on this, Mr. Conti?
I have not done the research on this parcel. I agree with Mr. Scanlon that this was left over from the Miles Standish development.
It's actually an old sewer plant on the property.
An old sewer plant?
Yep, it's an old city sewer plant.
City sewer plant.
So, huh? Oh, sorry, Paul Dever sewer plant.
Okay, so the zoning change, so in order to move forward with this, so if we declare this surplus this evening, the city, your office, would have to come back for a zoning change with this council and also go to the zoning board for a variance for frontage. Correct. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any questions from the committee? Any questions? Council Padia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This came up before, I don't know if it was this iteration of a council or the earlier iteration of the council before, and a question that was made at that time, and I don't know if it was ever sufficiently answered, was when we decided as a city to do whatever phase that allowed Montanetti and developments around that side of the industrial park expansion, there was recreational land or open space that was set aside as part of that development that I believe was transferred to this particular property to, again, be either recreational or open space. And I wasn't the real proponent of that. Councilor Carr certainly was at the time. And I thought it was this parcel. So I don't know if this committee has looked at that. And if they haven't, I'd like to talk to Councilor Carr further insofar as her memory of that, because I've been on the council for a long time, and I thought that was the situation. So that's the point I'd just like to make, and I don't know if that's been sufficiently run out by the committee to
On
do
that
some research
point.
on.
I believe that went to Warner Boulevard.
Yes, so my thought on that particular point would be if we deem it surplus this evening, we're gonna need to get a thorough presentation for a zoning change. And we're gonna need Mr. Conti and, Mr. Dela Russo and this team to tell us all about how it got that zoning designation and why it's a good idea to change it. That's gonna be a hearing all in itself.
In the council Borch's point, thank you for that. If we can just lay that out and have any records thereof and votes thereof would certainly be appreciated. I'm sure Councilor Carr, former Councilor Carr, will come to that discussion though too about Warner Boulevard, so I
Actually,
appreciate
perhaps you
that.
could run a title on the property.
So if I may, I wasn't prepared to be part of this presentation tonight, but the law department has reviewed the question of whether this parcel is deed restricted. So we looked at the history of different votes that came before the council and even legislation, because this parcel was tied in with some other things that happened in the industrial park. And I don't have that research with me, but I do know that our review was that there was no deed restriction that prevents the
Just the zoning
development of
change.
this. So that the only restriction is the zoning ordinance, but not a deed restriction.
And the only other point to bring up would be if there were any buffer requirements of this property to Miles Standish Industrial Park to neighbors, that'd be something else to maybe run out sufficiently, because it does, now you're basically back, depending upon what the uses is going to be, butting up right against homes in that area. So again, just another point I'd just like to add. So, but thank you for this committee for bringing that to our attention.
And I would assume that this would probably be the most valuable property we're talking about tonight,
Probably. Yep.
being an industrial use in the industrial
Demand
park.
for it, yeah.
28
We don't
acres
have to
is,
tear down an ugly school building or anything.
yeah, 28 acres is quite a good-sized industrial space. That's got a lot of value. Obviously, you see the appraisal is 2.3
And
million.
team did a very extensive search, which is also in your binders of where the wetlands are, how much usable space there is and everything. So the effort to provide the information was there.
Mr. Conti, how much does 2.5 million bring in revenue on the commercial side?
What is the question?
2.5 million on the commercial side.
It's going to, in annual tax dollars, it's going to be about, you tested me, I don't have my HP 12C here.
Yeah, was it,
It's north of $30,000 a year.
it's 31 per thousand, 31 and change, right?
No, it's 2862.
Ah.
2630, yeah.
I'm going to go to, do you mind if I,
It's on his point.
Council Borges?
Thank you. I believe that Councilor Potier is correct. I think that when that land went to, that recreational space went to Warner Boulevard, I'm pretty sure that he's right. I think that that is a buffer for the for the Miles Standish Industrial Park. I think he has a good point. It's starting to come back.
Yeah, but we'll have to,
Yeah, we'll deal with that, but I'm just saying, like, I do remember that.
we'll have to
something
get a full
Yeah.
presentation on that subject.
Question, and if it's 2 million, then it's $36 per thousand, right? Valuation, so we're talking about like 70 grand or something like that, maybe, if I did the math?
2.5 million times 2630 per thousand
Yeah.
comes to what?
Well, 2 million? 2.5 million?
2.5 million
Divided by 1,000
0.0.
times,
.026.
yeah, but times what? What's it, $36 a thousand?
65,000 roughly, right?
Would you say 70?
About
Yeah, I'm close to that.
65,000
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot of money.
We're around there.
As opposed to nothing.
Annette. Councilor Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry? Oh, sorry. A few questions, and I share Councilor Potier's curiosity about how various lands have been swapped and whether this is one, and I take the city solicitor's point that it, perhaps nobody went to the trouble to have it specifically deed restricted, but if the intention was, if the work was done to exchange one piece of land for another in order to satisfy some agreement or rules, then whether it's specifically deed restricted or not, I would want to honor that. So it sounds like there's a lot of research that still needs to be done regarding this property. A few notes in the report that leapt out at me that I wanted to ask about. So just for starters, it talks about, I know somebody had said, oh, this is in the industrial zone, and one of the notes is that a small portion, and this is the quote, a small portion sits in the industrial zone. The majority of the property is open spaced conservancy district. So it leans on the industrial park, but it's not like a big parcel of land in the middle of the industrial park. It's kind of hitched onto it, but most of it is apparently open space conservancy district. I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask is this other note. It talks about the subject property is considered to be an open space zoned undevelopable site. When in this paragraph, and it also talks about wetlands on the eastern boundary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The site requires a granted variance for a proposed ROW easement into the lot in order to be considered a developable property. Is that why it's undevelopable, just because there's no access to it at this point, and there needs to be an easement to get there? And then that would lead to, and I'll just finish my comments and then chuck it out for you to explain it all to me. There's also another portion here that talks about the city of Taunton to create the ROW right-of-way. Got it. The city of Taunton would most likely need to accomplish a land taking where necessary in order to accomplish the right-of-way and the, I guess, access to make it developable. Is this ringing a bell to anyone? Can anyone make this make a little bit more sense than I have?
So again, we kicked this around quite a bit. We had some folks take a look at it that expressed interest. Prior to Mr. Patikas's arrival, we did further study on the property, and there were several acres inside the property that were suitable to be built out. So we hit the pause button, and we began. We put this property forward for discussion. As Councilor Coit mentioned, we'll come back with a more full report for everybody. So if that's, but I think that we need to, as we've done throughout the night, if it's possible to have the declared surplus, so we can at least start to begin to get an RFP together for this, right? And then let the additional title search and research kind of.
Yeah, well, on this one's a little different because you would need an RFP to get started, but Attorney Costa would need to conduct a full title to get all the details of the property and then bring that back to the council for a zoning change, because you can't move forward with anything unless you get a zoning change.
Right.
So this one is a little more in-depth. So,
Just to button up, Mike, and no disrespect intended, obviously, but
Yeah.
it seems a little cart before the horse. I would rather know everything there is to know about this property before we start declaring it surplus and then starting that path. I'm not the most seasoned counselor here, but I've been down this road a few times in the past, and 3 steps down the road, sometimes there's no way to turn back and go back where you started. So I'm not doing that again. I try to make my decisions at the front end rather than try to undo them later. So if the intention of the committee is to move forward with this, I'm going to be a no.
my thoughts on that particular concern would be, if the city doesn't want to deem it surplus, there's no reason to spend $10,000 on a title and do all the research. The only reason to do all that is if there's an appetite to deem it surplus. If this committee doesn't want to deem it surplus, then we don't spend all that money and all that time, effort, and energy researching a parcel that isn't gonna, that would be my thought on that. And, you know, a zoning change is a public hearing that will require input from the public, and it'll be a full-fledged hearing on the full agenda. So it's a pretty in-depth, you know, hearing. Abutters are notified the whole 9 yards on a zoning change. Council Borges.
So the recommendation is going to be to go for an RFP and not an open auction, is that what I'm hearing?
I think, in my opinion, a property like this, because this is going to be a very desirable property, I think. You said you've been here 5 weeks? And how many industrial calls we received?
Dozens.
Dozens. Yep, so,
And I agree with that, just because of the residential
because it could be
area.
anywhere from a manufacturing facility to,
We're calling current companies to try to see if they would rent space inside their business for these calls that we're getting.
Yeah.
It's that desperate.
there's definitely a shortage of industrial space in this area, no doubt about it. So I think my recommendation would be to declare it surplus, move it to the RFP committee, and have the law department conduct a full title, the city clerk do a zoning change hearing, and schedule that through the city clerk and notify all abutters. That'd be American.
In the zoning change.
That would be the zoning change. The variance would be obviously with the zoning board. That wouldn't, and you can include that in the motion, go to the zoning board as well and do that, because if the zoning board doesn't grant that variance, you can stop everything else.
If Mr. Conte could just confirm that this parcel ID is correct. Do you have that in front of you? Okay,
Yes, it is
all right,
correct.
thank you.
So do you want me to restate that again? I'll motion to declare the surplus, move to the RFP process, require the city solicitor order a full title on this property, the city clerk to conduct, advertise for a zoning change hearing, and the OECD office to go to the zoning board to request a variance. Did I miss a step? Okay. Okay, refer it to the zoning change process. The planning board needs to give a recommendation? Okay, so there needs to be 2 public hearings on the zoning change. I forgot about that. Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in
Sure.
favor?
Mr. Chair, if you wouldn't mind including in that motion that the needed authorities also be informed about the reference to land takings that would be needed. I think that'd be an important component to understand before we move forward on this parcel.
You said this, I would think the land taker would be to a private person? It would be a private person's land taking, I assume, somebody who owns land.
Well, you would know better than I would, but when I hear land taking, what I hear is the city has to take somebody's
Right.
land in order to make this work. So I would like to know what that is going to look like.
Okay, well, you said the needed authorities. So my thought would be we can add to the motion that the law department, how would you want to handle that with, prior to discussion with the person? Turn your mic on, please.
I think we'd have to ascertain what land, what taking was needed, and then that taking would have to be approved through the council. That would be.
Where in the process would you think that would happen? During the zoning change, before the zoning change? After the zoning change?
I think it depends on whether the land that's taken needs to be part of that zoning change. I don't know the details of the taking that's needed.
So we'll add to the motion that the OECD office thoroughly vet the land taking process and have it discussed as part of the zoning change. Hearing, sure. Would you like to comment, Councilor Duarte?
I just have a clarification question. Is this RFP coming back to the committee, or is this just going to the RFP committee to?
RFP committee was my intention on this one.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh. I skipped the public input, so we'll offer it now. Motion open public input? Motion in second on that? Motion made in second. All in favor?
Aye.
If the land at one point...
Name and address, please.
Robert Carroll, 106 Dayton Avenue. If the land was considered open space conservation at one point, how was it just taken off the open space conservation? Could it be, from now on, every time any project comes up and has that on there, down the road, they can be just taken away? Doesn't seem right.
Any more questions?
That's it.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak on this? Motion to close public input?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
To speak to that point, this vote tonight was simply to declare this parcel surplus. We need to have 2 public hearings, one with the planning board and one with the city council, in which abutters will be notified to talk about so there's open space and then there's deed restricted conservation. The open space is a zoning designation, so there needs to be 2 public hearings to talk about if that zoning designation from open space will be changed to industrial. So that was not voted on tonight. That's two other hearings, one with the planning board, one with the city council, where abutters will be notified, and that will be discussed, that particular piece of the equation. Tonight, we voted to name that parcel surplus. Okay. Where are we?
Parcel's wrong on this. It's 2929 one.
I have it, 29,
Yeah,
29.
you got it right on the slide, but you got it wrong.
The address is 745 John Hancock, though, correct?
Numbers wrong here.
Right.
John Hancock Road.
It was
Mr.
added.
Costa, Attorney Costa, we got the parcel wrong here. Do you recommend we move forward and discuss this, or we table it?
I would actually recommend that, that we get the parcel correct, because there's no street address, it only references a parcel ID, and if it's not accurate, then it really doesn't identify this particular parcel.
Motion to table the discussion on John Hancock
Second.
Park Road.
Motion made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I want to thank your team for a lot of hard work on this program, a lot of hard work on research. Each and every person at the table, and Mr. Scanlon, thank you very, very much for bringing these to the council. We have to have another discussion about 30 Winter Plain, as well as John Hancock